the #1 Costa Rica real estate and investment podcast, bringing you experts from all over Costa Rica.
Hello and welcome to episode 217 of Costa Rica Real Estate and Investments with me, your host, Richard Vexon. Today we're going to be talking with Scott Oliver, former long-term resident and author here in Costa Rica of how to buy Costa Rica real estate without losing your camisa shirt, and now resident of Guatemala, where actually he runs living in Guatemala. So today we're going to be talking to him about his experience in Costa Rica and also now Guatemala. He spent many, many years in Costa Rica and just saw a lot of, I would say, good stuff and also bad stuff. So we're going to be covering some of that in the podcast. Guys, remember, if anyone's looking to do anything here in Costa Rica, no matter what it is, it's amazing when people actually do end up working with us and start working with us. Of just like, I'm so glad that I actually found you guys. Like, you really took care of me and made me really understand the whole process from start to finish. And that can be, you know, buying a piece of property here, buying a business, developing something here. We actually have our own investment opportunities available as well. We're about to start phase 2 in Manuel Antonio. We're about to start phase 2 in Aranao in the next coming months. So if there's any interest there, feel free to email us, guys, info@investingcostarica.com. That's info@investingcostarica.com. But let's get straight into the podcast. Good afternoon, Scott. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful, thank you, Richard. How are you?
Good. It's raining here in Costa Rica at the moment. I don't know how it is. How is it in Guatemala?
It's a picture-perfect day, although, yes, it is the rainy season, but today's gorgeous.
Wow. Well, Scott, very much appreciate you coming on the podcast. I think it's the first time that we'll be talking about Guatemala on the podcast. I think we've talked Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, and also Mexico before, but the first time that we'll also touch on Guatemala. So I'm looking forward to this one.
Good. Well, we're happy to be here. Obviously, we're not neighbors, but we're very close countries here in Central America. So yes, I'm looking forward to chatting.
Awesome. Well, Scott, I mean, I think there's been some volatility in Western markets recently. You know, I think that looks like it's probably here to stay for the foreseeable future. But I mean, what do you see happening? What are you seeing happening in Guatemala at the moment?
Guatemala is a fairly unique beast as far as volatility is concerned. It's an incredibly stable market, both from a currency standpoint as well as the real estate market. Costa Rica obviously has had some phenomenal boom years, but it is a lot more a much more volatile market than Guatemala is in every way. You know, which is not to say one is better than the other, but the Guatemalan currency itself is probably the most stable currency in Central and Latin America. If you look at it, you know, historically against the US dollar, it's just about the same it is now as it was 20 years ago.
Wow.
So a lot of people feel comfortable with that. But real estate market, the returns here in Guatemala are not as attractive as they historically have been in Costa Rica, but they have been a lot more stable.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, I mean, a lot of people that come to Costa Rica, I always say, you need to go to Guatemala. Like, it is beautiful. Like, it's spectacular and has just as good coffee as Costa Rica as well.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure the Guatemalans would say it's better, and I'm sure the Costa Ricans would say it's better. But we'll leave that. But yeah, I mean, I think the thing that has people, I would say, a little worried about Guatemala is just like safety. That makes sense, you know, because I mean, do you think that that's a concern that they need to have? Because here in Costa Rica, I would say that you don't really need to worry about that much.
Well, just to touch on the coffee aspect of things, don't tell my wife this, but I actually prefer Costa Rican coffee to Guatemalan coffee, but we do produce like twice as much coffee as Costa Rica. But with regard to the safety aspect, I wrote an article about this many years ago in Costa Rica. As you know, I was there for 20 years. And the same thing applies here in Guatemala. If you're not involved in the sale, the production, or the distribution of illegal drugs,
Yep.
in Costa Rica or in Guatemala, you can live a very comfortable life.
Wow.
I mean, it really is that simple. Needless to say, there are areas where, you know, you probably wouldn't want to live in Costa Rica, and there are areas where I wouldn't want to live in Guatemala or any other major city in the United States or in London for that matter. But what I do find interesting at the moment is that while the first world appears to be deteriorating into third world status, it's the third world countries, which is not really diplomatically correct. We're supposed to call them LDCs, less developed countries. It's less developed countries like Costa Rica and Guatemala that seem to be improving dramatically.
Yeah.
More and more people seem to be be fleeing from the first world countries into places like Costa Rica and Guatemala. And obviously, we're happy to help those people that do want to come here.
Yeah, I mean, I always say to people like, look, we're just getting started here in Costa Rica, but like everything is new. Like this was a fresh canvas that we're kind of building here. And I'm sure it's very similar in Guatemala. Like, the UK, which we're both from, is very old. Changing stuff over there is very difficult to do.
Well, we probably shouldn't get political,
Of
but
course, yeah.
I mean, you and I have both seen some horrendously dramatic changes in the United Kingdom when it comes to demographics. And unfortunately, we're seeing similar changes being forced on our friends up north in the United States of America. And this is, not by accident. This is a deliberate plan. But unfortunately, these things are actually benefiting us because people from the UK and Europe and the United States and Canada are looking for a plan B. They're looking for a place where they can live affordably in a climate that is infinitely more comfortable than the UK. And we spoke the other week when you were in the UK and you were freezing your...
Oh, yeah. Behind us, yeah.
Exactly. And here, Guatemala is called the land of eternal spring for a very good reason. And that is, like Costa Rica to a certain extent, you can choose your climate by choosing the elevation. And I think the climate where we are here is absolutely bloody perfect. I mean, we're at the same sort of elevation as Denver, Colorado. And it's gorgeous all year round. November and December, yeah, it's a little chilly, but we're designed for that anyway.
Exactly. I mean, when you say a little chilly, what's chilly nowadays, Scott? Because chilly for me is like under 18 degrees Celsius.
Okay, well, here in early December it was I think 7 degrees.
Okay. So it's not. I mean,
so that was chilly, but we have a big, beautiful fireplace, so it didn't bother us too much.
But it's like a dry chili, not like a damp English chili.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I remember I was in the Royal Marines commandos for years in the UK, and we used to do these exercises in Wales and the Brecon Beacons, and we did a lot of mountain and Arctic warfare stuff up in Scotland and in Norway. And yeah, that kind of cold that literally seeps into the marrow of your bones is not something I ever want to feel again, and that's not something that you would have here in Guatemala. Well, unless you go up to the real highlands.
Yep.
There's areas in the highlands of Guatemala called Nueva Escocia, New Scotland.
Wow.
I haven't been there yet, but they've got plenty of lambs, so I do plan on going.
Wow. New Scotland. Love it. I mean, you just mentioned you spent 20 years here in Costa Rica. I mean, and I'm a little concerned at the moment that we're going to start to see some malinvestment start to kind of shake out here, potentially here in Costa Rica. But I mean, what are some of the ways that you've seen that people have just made bad investments during your time when you were here?
Well, there are 1,000 bad things that people have done, unfortunately, normally caused by fellow countrymen.
Yep.
When I wrote my first book, one of the first chapters was all about when it sounds too good to be true. And for many, many years, there were various real estate groups, big boiler room operations advertising ocean view land that didn't really have an ocean view. And we're talking, dozens of these different groups spending absolutely enormous amounts of money on lead generation. One particular group, which I was vociferously against, called Paragon Properties of Costa Rica, made my life absolute bloody hell in a variety of ways, threatened my life in a variety of ways because I was warning people off them. But these weren't Ticos. These were Americans working out of boiler rooms in Florida, and they were spending $50,000+ per month on Google ads in the days when Google ads were cheap.
Yep.
And they ripped off tens of thousands of people, again, selling ocean view land that didn't actually have the ocean view. And at one point, I think they ended up having 12 different projects with 3 completed homes on all 12 combined.
Wow.
And that was just one group. And apart from that, there were also a numerous amount of investment pyramid schemes going on. And I wrote about them too. And funny enough, the head of one of them called me one day. I don't know if you saw this book, my Costa Rica's Guide to Making Money Offshore. In that book, I spoke about this investment program, and he called me up, the lead guy. I'm not going to mention his name because that would probably cause even more problems for me. But he called me up when I was in the line for Riteve for the car test. And he's saying, this is so-and-so, I'm speaking to you because you've been saying things about my company, and if I found out that they're not true, I will use every measure of the law to take action. And I'm in my car and I'm waiting for the car test. And nothing quite clicked at the time. And I think, oh my God, this is the guy. But I mean, in the end, they collapsed like all the other investment scheme collapsed. I should point out I spent 10 years on Wall Street also, so I've got a fairly good background of what's possible and what's not with various sophisticated investment programs which these people claim to be. So unfortunately, Costa Rica's had a bad rap because of those various scams. But as long as people are dealing with trustworthy professionals, they should be in very good hands. Obviously, your company provides a very valuable service in making sure that they are dealing with professionals. They are dealing with, people that understand land, people understand valuation, people understand construction. And as long as people are taking that professional advice and not listening to, some dickhead that calls them on the telephone selling them land, then they should be okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since we've heard about those those boiler room. I think it's I mean, in the 90s and early 2000s, there were a lot of sports books here. You just don't see them here anymore. Costa Rica's, I would say, somewhat cleaned up its act and it's become a little bit more mainstream and mature. But, I mean, how would you go about, though? Because, I mean, there are a lot of people out there that seem trusting. I mean, what are some of the questions or some of the research that you would do to find out whether, they are decent?
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? The best con artists are very trusting.
Yeah, true.
And I don't know if you know this, but some of the most valuable lists that are out there for people to buy for sales and marketing are people that have already been conned. And they're expensive because they know they've already been conned and it's not that difficult to con them again.
Yeah.
But what I find fascinating, especially during that period of time, was people were willing to spend 25, 50, whatever grand it was to buy for their little plot of land. And they did less research on that little plot of land and the people behind it than they would do when they would buy a refrigerator.
Yep.
Which frankly is insane. But, we've seen numerous examples of that over the past 4 or 5 years with an experimental medical product that people did no research on and trusted supposedly the experts out there. Those experts have obviously proven to be absolutely, completely untrue and were lying through their teeth. And when you are dealing with obviously people that are selling land, when you're dealing with developers, it's not that difficult to actually look into the developer. It's not that difficult to speak to an attorney and say, look, do a little bit of research here. I'll send you some money, do some background, make sure this land is truly land that is available for purchase. Because just like Costa Rica, there are some parts of Guatemala that a foreigner can't buy. There's not many, but you have obviously land in Costa Rica near the waterfront that you can't possibly own. There are also other minor factors where you can't purchase land, but that's where, again, trusted advisors, trusted attorneys are absolutely essential in this type of a thing, as they are in very many other aspects of life.
Yeah, I find a lot of people sometimes are kind of like penny wise, pound foolish when it comes to like, I don't want to get all the studies done. And really, do I have to spend that amount of money, to have the lawyer do all the background checks? And then, I mean, topography studies, soil studies, river setbacks, if it's got trees on it, like if you want to, potentially take down a tree for a building or something, a forestry engineer. But it is crazy sometimes, because we sometimes engage with clients after they've bought land and it's like, well, did you get any of that stuff done? And it's like, well, no, we didn't. Like, nobody told us we needed to get that done. And like, what do you mean no one told you need to get that done? Like, any smart lawyer is going to tell you need those things done.
Well, yeah. And the other big factor, which obviously you do know, is that the vast majority, I'm assuming the vast majority are clients of your clients from North America, are they?
Yeah, North America or from Europe, yeah.
Okay, so whether it's North America or whether they're Brits, for example, their legal system is based on common law. So, they may have bought 50 properties up there, they may have built lots of homes up there, but it's a completely bloody different legal system. So if you're willing to take the risk of trying to develop property, trying to buy a property, trying to build a home, and that you're doing this in a country where the legal system is completely and totally different, sorry, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
Okay. So, it is a completely different legal system. Obviously, the UK, most of the all of the United, well, not most of the United States. I think Louisiana's not. I think Louisiana's Napoleonic law. In Canada, I think Quebec is Napoleonic law, but everything else is based on common law. So it's a completely different system of law. I would strongly encourage you to seek professional advice that understands those differences, because, as you also know, my real estate book many years ago was how to buy Costa Rica real estate without losing your camisa, losing your shirt. Okay, so I mean, if you want to lose your shirt, by all means, go ahead, think you can do it yourself and try to do it yourself. The odds are you will lose your shirt and maybe your underwear too. So get real trusted advice, ideally from somebody that perhaps you've recommended, an attorney that you know and trust, and then move forward in a careful, obviously prudent way.
Yeah, I always say to anyone looking to invest in Costa Rica, it's caveat emptor, buyer beware here. You know, you need to do everything, because as soon as you buy it, there's no recourse. Or there is, but it could take forever.
Yep.
You know?
Well, and the other thing, of course, that happens a lot in Costa Rica, I haven't actually come across it too much here, is that sobre precio that you have in Costa Rica, where, you know, the seller says to the realtor, look, you know, you get me $200,000 for this land, and whatever you get on top of that is yours.
Yep.
Clearly, that's not something that most of Americans or Brits are accustomed to. You know, most of America, you can buy your land, $200,000 or whatever it is, and you've got your 5 or 6% sales commission. In Costa Rica, on a fairly regular basis, depending obviously on the realtor you're dealing with, and let's also remember that realtor is a trademark term, so we should be saying real estate salesperson or real estate scam artist. So, you know, the real estate or the unscrupulous real estate guy says, okay, he wants 200,000. I'm going to put it for 250. If the guy pays 250, I've just made 50 grand instead of my usual 5%, which is 10. Yeah. So that obviously is something that people also have to bear in mind. And the other thing people have to bear in mind, obviously, is those little cross-cultural differences. And just because a Tico, or in my case, un Guatemalteco, a Guatemalan, speaks good English, doesn't mean to say they're thinking the same way that you do. Okay, so I'll give you an example. My wife and I, we built a number of like holiday homes in the mountains of Costa Rica, up in Santa Maria de Dota and Quebradillas de Dota, Jardín de Dota. Yep. And we ended up, I think we built 5 or 6 different sort of log cabin style homes, which we loved. But there was one particular place where we wanted to buy, and there was a beautiful plot of land. I can't remember the prices now. Let's call it 35 grand, long time ago. And there was another lot beside it, which was a little bit too close for comfort, and it would have been perfect to buy the two of them. So the guy wanted 35 grand for one of them. And I figured, okay, how about we offer him a little bit less and we take both of them, okay? Because that's how our minds work. So I went back and I said, look, okay, I'm delighted that you're willing to sell this to us for 35 grand, but we're wondering, you know, if we bought those two, would we be able to get both of them for 50 grand? You know, I'm obviously being aggressive with my pricing. And he said, well, you know, let me talk to my father and I'll get back to you. He came back to us with $120,000 for the two of them.
Yeah. I've seen that a lot, man. It's crazy sometimes.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
Anyway, those 2 plots of land, I'm told, are still available.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's, you know, sometimes people hear something that something's sold at some price somewhere, and then that's what they're going to sell their land for. Whereas, you know, I mean, what's the price of something? It's worth what someone's willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
You know, ultimately. But I mean, where have you seen, because again, you spent a long time here in Costa Rica. What have been some of the best investments that you've seen in the country?
Well, we bought a number of apartments in pre-construction. They turned out to be very good for us. I mean, we've sold a couple of them, but we kept most of them for income purposes. And those worked out very well, and those were in Santa Ana, obviously just outside of San Jose. We also have helped many investors, obviously, to invest in a variety of properties in Costa Rica. We helped, I mean, literally thousands of people to move to Costa Rica and thousands of people to buy property. Not all of us personally. I'm not a realtor. I've never been a realtor. I don't want to be one, but my wife was probably one of the best realtors in the Central Valley area, and certainly most successful. But we had a network of realtors around the country, people who I felt were, you know, the best at what they do, which is probably like the top 0.01%. since 98% of them have absolutely no clue. So lots of people made money based on buying land out in the same parts that you guys have been recommending out near the coast. They've done very well. We also had people do very well. I mean, I don't know if you know Becky up there on the coast. She's also she's also done very well, obviously developing property, both homes as well as strip malls. So I mean, depending on somebody's risk tolerance, depending obviously on the investment, on the amount that they're willing to invest, I think there's still numerous opportunities in Costa Rica, but obviously the prices are very different compared to what they used to. I mean, when I got to Costa Rica in 1999, I mean, you could buy 2 or 3 properties in Costa Rica for the price of one in Florida. Now you can buy 2 or 3 properties in Florida for the price of one in Costa Rica.
Yeah, it's definitely changed, that's for sure. I mean, when do you think it was that it started getting expensive? You reckon it was after CAFTA or like, because it used to be affordable?
Well, yeah, it did. I mean, Costa Rica obviously has a different set of problems, thankfully for me in Guatemala, because your inflation rate is higher, your debt rate is significantly higher. You know, Costa Rica, for example, it's like half the size comparatively in land size, but Guatemala's got like 5 times as many people population-wise, but Costa Rica has actually more government employees than Guatemala does.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, it's sad, but I mean, all of those factors obviously do mean something. That means the cost of living is going to be a little bit higher. But I mean, for us, the website that I had at the time, which I loved, was my baby for probably, I guess, 16 years before I sold it. That started to change, or the whole attitude started to change, and prices big time started to change. I would say around about the 2009, 2008 crisis.
Yep.
Things started to get really odd because although the Costa Rica real estate market has been fairly stable, it is more volatile than Guatemala's, but it's not as volatile as the United States. And obviously it's all local, but you know, there are certain areas in the United States where prices have been so insanely volatile, it's difficult to believe. And obviously now, for example, in Florida, we've got some very serious problems with real estate prices there. So there's lots of moving parts, but at the end of the day, it's a great plan B, whether it's Costa Rica or whether it's Guatemala. And with what's going on in the United States, with what's happening in Europe and the United Kingdom, I think intelligent, freedom-minded people who truly want to avoid the matrix are looking at our countries as a good plan B.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Portugal seems to be jumping on there a little bit as well. You know, I think that might be a little overdone. I think it's starting, you know, people are starting to pull back from that. But I definitely know in Latin America, Guatemala and you know, Costa Rica is definitely on there, and Mexico as well. But I mean, what are the main differences, would you say, from Guatemala to Costa Rica? Like, how's cost of living? You know, I mean, what would you say the main differences are?
Well, there are many. The cost of living is most definitely much more affordable here. It will depend on the area. I mean, obviously, most people have heard of Antigua, which is the old colonial city, been around since the 1500s. It is a magnificent place. I mean, anywhere I go where I can't stop taking photographs, for me, is like fantastic. And no matter where I go in Antigua, and I've been hundreds of times, and I lived there for 6 months, depending on the light of day, I'm taking the same bloody picture, you know, for the 5th time, 6th time, 10th time. So in and around Antigua, your cost of living is still cheaper than Costa Rica, but it is probably the most expensive area in Guatemala. Okay, even more expensive than Guatemala City itself. But I would suggest that the actual living expenses, food, etc., here is probably about 30% of Costa Rica.
Wow, that's a big difference.
It is a big difference, but it's also lifestyle related. I mean, when you go to, you know, the different towns, whether it's Chichicastenango or Antigua or in Guatemala City, where I am, there's nearly always a real market. I mean, a real market with real people, not a mall, you know, a real market where you can buy your groceries for, I mean, pennies compared to what you typically buy them in the big supermarkets. So that's one thing. The minimum salary in Costa Rica is about twice what it is in Guatemala. So obviously labor costs here are very much lower. So your cost to build here will be very much lower than it would be in Costa Rica. The cost to buy something here is certainly lower than it is in Costa Rica. And depending on the area, again, Antigua's a bit of a different market, but it is cheaper than Costa Rica. But here, for example, we built a home here in a very good area. This is a fairly exclusive golf club residential community. We built for $666 per square meter, and this is a very nice home.
I mean, probably, I mean, if it's a very nice home, would cost over $3,000 a square meter here in Costa Rica.
Well, I mean, we obviously help build a lot of homes in Costa Rica. I think this we could probably build. Well, the last home we built was in Valle del Sol.
Yep.
It was a rather larger home than where we are right now, but I think we could probably build this one instead. And that doesn't include land costs, by the way. But 666 here. I think we could probably have done it there for maybe $1,900, something like that.
Okay.
So it is very different, but just the same as in Costa Rica, and as I'm sure you tell your clients this, if you've got the wrong builder, you're screwed from day one.
Yeah, you are.
So, you know, we were very lucky here. We found an absolutely incredible maestro de obra, the foreman, and his team of builders. I mean, if we'd had this guy in Costa Rica, I would have made billions of dollars in Costa Rica with him. But we didn't have him in Costa Rica, but we were very lucky here. And I mean, we've obviously got a network like you of people here in Guatemala that can help people that want to build. I'm not sure if it's going to be that price. Obviously, it depends on people's tastes and everything else, but costs are significantly lower here.
Yeah. It's funny that you said that, just because I had someone contact me the other day that was like, hey, Rich, I don't think I need your help anymore. I've bumped into a good builder and I think everything's going to be great. And I was like, look, and I sent her I sent them a sheet of like, here is a spread of 5 different builders to give you an idea on just a recent build that we did. We went out to bid and it was 800 to 1.35 million. That was the spread. I'm like, your builder could be that 1.35 million person. They could also be the $800,000, but you don't know that because you've got no perspective, you know? So just going with one makes no sense, you know? So yeah, I mean, it's just crazy when people are just like, no, I found a good guy. Like, he seems cool. And I'm like, yeah, they all seem cool when it kind of begins and like trustworthy, but it's the management of the money where it all goes wrong, man. And like, even we come across it in some of our builds. Like, we have a build at the moment, which is a key in hand build where we're in the last 90%. And the guy comes to us and goes, Rich, I needed $100,000 to finish this. And it's like, what are you on about, man? It's a key in hand. Like, that's your problem. You know, so we've had to basically rip everything from him in order to de-risk the project for the client. And the client has to pay directly to all the vendors and be like, look, you need to still install this stuff, but like, you are not touching money anymore. You know, so yeah.
No, it's sad. I mean, but then again, with this part of things, if somebody does have building experience elsewhere, that will certainly be useful if they plan on building in Costa Rica or in Guatemala. But they need to be there all the time. They can't, you know, they can't do this sitting in their home in Calgary, Canada, thinking, you know, the guy's going to send me photographs every month and everything's going to be okay. So that's the first thing. The second thing, of course, is, you know, that price per square meter could involve all sorts of different things, and you could get 2 very different qualities for the exact same price per square meter. That's one thing. And obviously the same applies to the architect. Some architects are good, some architects absolutely suck. You know, they don't know that in this particular sector, the rain comes like this. And, you know, if you don't have a proper structure over your windows, you know, you've got a window open 1 inch and you've got a flooding in your bloody living room. Yeah. So at every step of the way, you need to make sure that you're doing business with the best possible professionals. Again, people that hopefully have been highly recommended by others, and not your taxi driver's sister's boyfriend.
Yeah, I've heard that a few times.
Of course.
What do you think is, I mean, what do you like about Guatemala? Like, what just really, you know, because again, you helped a lot of people move to Costa Rica. Now you're helping people move to Guatemala. I mean, why that change? And like, I mean, why focus on Guatemala, if you don't mind me asking, Scott?
Oh, not at all. Well, I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but my wife is from Guatemala. Yep. We did actually meet in Costa Rica in Multiplaza because her family had stores. I went into Multiplaza to buy a pair of boots and she helped me. And the boots lasted a year and she's still with me. So at some stage it was, you know, we were destined to come back here. She has her brother here, her sister's here. Her mother was here for obviously a long time. She's since passed away. She has a daughter here and 2 grandchildren. And in Costa Rica, she has 2 sons and 3 grandchildren. So She goes to and from Costa Rica and Guatemala all the time. I stay here. I want to stay here. I like staying here. But having said that, just from a personal standpoint, there's also a very big difference between Costa Rica and Guatemala. There are two very different markets. I believe Guatemala has infinitely more color and culture. I mean, we have like 7 million indigenous Indians living in Guatemala, which is more than the entire population of Costa Rica, plus the regular population. So I think it's about 14, 15 million in total population. But that color and culture, which is easy to see throughout the country, for me, is incredibly exciting. You know, with their different festivals, etc. We've got 24 indigenous languages in Guatemala, whereas in Costa Rica, I think there's 4 indigenous languages and 2 are shared with Panama, so there's really only 2. And in Costa Rica, people are really ashamed of the indigenous population, whereas here, you can't be ashamed of half the population. It's a very big part of the country. And there are some really interesting little places that you go to in Guatemala that are, obviously purely, indigenous people, where you wouldn't misbehave because, you might get hung, and I do mean that seriously. So that for me is exciting. It's a real color, it's a real culture, which Costa Rica does not have. And if people appreciate, trying to become a part of a real culture and a real community, I think, Guatemala certainly wins hands down over Costa Rica. Having said that, if you're a beach bum and you love to be at the beach and you love to swim and you love to surf, I think probably Costa Rica beats Guatemala hands down there.
Yeah. Again, I mean, it's just, you mentioned Guatemala has a lot of color, and you can just see that instantly when you arrive there. I mean, it's just, especially Antigua. I mean, I go back every year to Antigua. It's one of the most beautiful places on the planet for me.
Well, just for your viewers, if you never even considered living in Guatemala, that's no problem. But as far as I'm concerned, as a photographer who's lived in 12 countries all over the world, if you don't come to Antigua for Holy Week or Semana Santa, you are literally missing one of the wonders of the world. It is absolutely insane. It's spectacular. Yes, it's busy. Yes, there are a lot of people, but the color and the opportunity for photographers, for photographs, for videos is just mind-blowing.
Wow. Where do you think the investment opportunity is in Guatemala? I mean, a lot of people that listen to this podcast are looking for investment opportunities, of course, outside of their home country. But where do you think it lies in Guatemala at the moment?
Well, again, like you would probably say to people, depending on the investment, depending on your risk tolerance, depending on how much involvement you want to have in that particular investment, we have obviously the same options that you do in Costa Rica. There are various returns depending on the places that you live in. Again, Antigua is a very touristy area, so there's not going to be much manufacturing around there. There's not many bodegas or anything like that you could be investing in, but land certainly could be profitable, although people are asking pretty insane prices there, so you need to understand the valuations. If you're looking for really cheap land, you could go up to Petén, which is northeast of the country, where you can find a much more affordable land than you would obviously around the capital area or in the Antigua area. Xela, or as the proper name is Quetzaltenango, you can still buy land there at reasonable prices. So there are still great opportunities here. The capital city here is growing, to a mind-blowing extent. We probably have more skyscrapers going up here than Costa Rica has built in the past 10 years. And I mean, right now, it's just insane. So here, depending on the zone, because the capital is divided into different zones, Zona 1, Zona 2, Zona 3, up to, I think it's 16, 17, 18. The most exclusive areas would be 15 and 16, and some areas of Zona 10. There at the moment, you can buy apartments for between 1,500, nice apartments. I'm not talking about just shells. Nice apartments for about 1,500 up to $2,000 a square meter.
Yeah.
So that I think is quite reasonable in comparison with many places. There are obviously much more expensive places. My own apartment in Zona 16, Zona 16, is rented to the U.S. Embassy, and that's I would consider that a luxury apartment. But the embassy was built like 200 meters away from the apartment.
Yeah,
which is kind of nice. But
very useful.
I heard rumors about that when I bought the apartment in pre-construction, so it worked out quite well. So, again, depending on the area, the overall best return on your money would come from bodegas, from warehouses.
Wow. Wow.
But that does involve normally a fairly significant investment.
Yeah.
We've been discussing with some people recently who built, I think it's 16 bodegas they built of 6,000 square meters each. So these are big bodegas. And I don't think people quite understand the scope of industry here in Guatemala and the scope of business here. There's also a lot of US and Canadian companies that have offshored their business here. And to give you an example, I went on a meditation retreat probably 6-7 months ago, and we started chatting to people, what do you do, etc. And one guy said, "Oh, I manage a call center." "Oh, really?" We started chatting, and I'm thinking he's got like 50 people there. He said he manages 5,000 people in a single call center in Guatemala City. That's
Wow.
just one call center. So I think people outside of Guatemala don't quite appreciate the size of business here. I don't think they appreciate the amount of money that's here. I mean, there are some incredibly wealthy people here. I mean, we have more helicopters per capita than most major cities in Europe. Because, well, A, the traffic sucks, but B, there's people here with, boatloads of bloody money.
Yep.
Having said that, as you very well know, there is a fairly significant percentage of the population who would be considered to be poor. But by most standards in the past 10 years, Guatemala has improved quite dramatically, whether it's water quality, whether it's nutrition, or whether it's education. So I'm hoping, we're at a cusp of good things happening. And another big difference between Costa Rica and Guatemala is your tourism agency has been quite good. And if I remember rightly, you were part of the board of the ICT for some time, right? Years ago.
Yes.
I'm not part of the board of any government organization. I couldn't handle that. I don't have the patience that you do. But the new guy in charge of Inguate, which is Guatemala's tourism board, is doing a really good job. And I've been trying to get to meet with him. I haven't met with him yet because he's doing the kind of stuff that I used to do with my website in Costa Rica. We've got to talk about the crime. We've got to talk about, these things because people are looking for them. You give them the information, the truthful information, which obviously is difficult to find these days about anything, but give the people the truth and let them decide what's best for them.
Correct. I mean, when you look at that stuff, it's actually safer down here than it probably is in most Western world, to be honest with you. I think it's just that fear that's been, I mean, whenever you see movies and stuff where there's bad guys, usually they're from a Latin American country.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, my missus, as you know, is Guatemalan. We don't speak English in the home at all. In fact, we've never actually had an English conversation in 25 years. So we watch 90% Spanish TV, and all of the Mexican movies on Netflix, I mean, what are they, like 90% are narcos, are drug dealers? So, of course, Mexico has, perhaps its more deserved reputation as a narco state than many places, but it's still obviously incredibly exaggerated. But having said that, sure, Costa Rica has its problems. Sure, Costa Rica has drug problems. Sure, it's getting worse. Guatemala has drug problems too, and sure, it's getting worse. But I think probably the progression or the deterioration that we are seeing is infinitely less and much slower than what we're seeing in the United States or in the UK, for example.
I agree. Well, my last question for you, Scott, as I've kept you long enough. If you inherited $500,000 and you had to invest it into a business or real estate in Costa Rica, I'm going to put the Costa Rica kind of focus on here. What would you invest it in and why?
The capital city is growing. There are serious traffic problems in many parts of the capital city. So a lot of people who are working in the city and who used to travel into the city now live in the city, but there's still a lot more people who would love to avoid the commute that they do every single day. And for those of you who haven't been in traffic in Guatemala or in Costa Rica, simply no comparison. In Guatemala City, you could spend 2 hours going to work, no problem, and literally going 15 kilometers. So it can be horrendous. So we're seeing a lot of that 15-minute city mentality here.
Yep.
Which from a political and control standpoint, as far as I'm concerned, is horrific, but From a living standpoint, obviously, it's great where you live in your condo and you have a supermarket downstairs and everybody else is, 50 meters away. So those specific areas, those little areas that are very, what's the word I'm looking for, contained, I think those are good areas to invest. So there are nice areas in Zona 15, lovely areas, excuse me, in Zona 16, Ciudad Cayala, which is the largest private city in Central and Latin America, has been a very good investment for us personally, and I think will continue to be a good investment. It's probably the safest city in the area. Well, not probably, it's most definitely the safest city in the area. And obviously, if it's good enough for the US Embassy, the brand new $400 million US Embassy, then they obviously did their homework. So I would probably invest that $500,000 in 2 or 3 apartments that I thought would be good rentals for executive type rentals.
What would you do if it was here in Costa Rica, Scott? Would you do the same down in Remeser, Savannah, Santana?
I'd probably call you, Richard.
No,
I mean, I've been out of I sold my business in Costa Rica in 2018. So I've been out of Costa Rica now out of the ins and outs of the market for a good 6 years. So I would not actually invest in Costa Rica without professional help from people like you. Obviously, we still own property in a particular project in Santa Ana. If something became available there, yeah, I would jump at that. But I think whether it's Guatemala or whether it's Costa Rica, the same thing applies. Completely different systems of law, completely different culture. There are communication differences. That intercultural communication difference is important that people understand. So if you do want to make an investment and you're not intimately familiar with the country, the people, the culture, and the laws, then please do try and get somebody who is a highly recommended person to help you make those decisions. And by all means, get second opinions, but try and get some professional advice.
I always say to people, trust but verify everything. Even I've had clients say to me, "Hey, I'm going to trust and verify that, Rich," and I'm like, "Go for it!" Go for it.
Absolutely. I mean, that is something I do too, especially in medicine after the past 5 years too. Trust but verify this guy and know what the hell he's talking about. And if he's one of those guys that's driving down the highway with a mask on and nobody else in the car, I'm never going to talk to him.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Scott, this has been an absolute pleasure having you here on the podcast. Anyone that wants to get into contact with Scott about basically, I suppose, investing, moving, living in Guatemala, I'll put all of his contact details down in the description, but very much appreciate you joining us.
Con mucho gusto, Richard.
No worries. Have a good one.
Okay. Hasta luego.
Interesting podcast there with Scott Oliver, guys. A 20-year veteran of Costa Rica, now living in Guatemala, has made, I would say, some money here in Costa Rica, has also authored quite a few books here in Costa Rica as well, and you can get them. All of the contact details are down in the description down below, and now in Guatemala as well, which is, is a very fast growing, I think, country. I absolutely love going there. If anyone has not been to Antigua, Guatemala, just go, because it's a World Heritage site. I love to say that even McDonald's has a wooden sign there because they cannot put up regular neon style signs there. It is a World Heritage site, cobbled streets, volcano, amazing food and great hotels. But yeah, been great there, kind of just talking about the difference between Guatemala and also Costa Rica. But if you do want to get in contact with Scott, again, all of his contact details are there down in the description down below. Remember, guys, if you need anything here in Costa Rica or want any advice, I mentioned there on the podcast, we also do project management within construction, investment advising, buyers reps, etc. You can email us info@investingcostarrica.com. That's info@investingcostarrica.com. If you've liked the podcast, guys, please subscribe, please like it, give us a review. I love to see the reviews online. And also, just seeing the number of 5-star reviews kind of continue to go up there as well. So thanks very much for the support. But until the next podcast, I'll catch you later. Bye.
The #1 Costa Rica real estate and investment podcast, bringing you experts from all over Costa Rica.